You've never once worried about whether you'd survive childbirth. And that's exactly the problem, because for most of human history, the knowledge that kept mothers and babies alive wasn't written in any textbook. It was whispered, practiced, passed hand to hand across generations. And somehow, against every odd, it worked. By the end of this, you'll understand that ancient humans didn't figure out childbirth despite having no doctors. They figured it out in ways that modern medicine is only now beginning to respect. Here's what almost no one tells you. Human childbirth is, biologically speaking, a disaster. Not metaphorically. Literally. Every other primate on Earth gives birth relatively easily and alone. A chimpanzee can deliver her infant in minutes, quietly, without assistance. But you're built wrong for it. And that wrongness happened on purpose. About 2 million years ago, something extraordinary happened to the human body. Our brains got bigger, dramatically bigger. Bigger brains meant bigger skulls. But walking upright, which we'd already committed to, meant narrower hips. The birth canal didn't just get tight. It got geometrically brutal. A human baby has to rotate its head, tuck its chin, twist its shoulders, and navigate a passage that's almost exactly the same size as the thing trying to pass through it. No other animal on Earth does this. It's called the obstetric dilemma, and it means that unlike every other primate, human babies cannot be born without help. This isn't a modern medical insight. This is something your ancient ancestors figured out through sheer, devastating trial and error. Mothers died, babies died, and the ones who survived? They survived because someone was there. Anthropologists now believe that cooperative birth, having other people present during delivery, is one of the oldest human behaviors we have. Older than agriculture, older than written language, possibly older than fire. The midwife isn't a medieval invention or a modern alternative. She's the original medical professional, and she existed because human biology made her necessary. But here's what gets genuinely strange. We know ancient humans had this knowledge. We know it was sophisticated. We know it worked well enough to populate the entire planet. So where did it come from? How did the very first humans figure out what to do when something went wrong? When a baby wouldn't turn? When a mother bled too much? When labor stalled for hours in the dark? The answer is older and stranger than you probably expect. Before there were words for medicine, there was pattern recognition. Ancient humans were extraordinary observers. They watched animals give birth. They noticed which positions seemed to help. They noticed which plants seemed to reduce bleeding or calm a mother's panic. They noticed that warmth mattered, that touch mattered, that the presence of calm, experienced women in the room changed outcomes in ways they couldn't explain but absolutely could see. There's a study from the University of Miami that found something genuinely striking. The simple presence of a trained birth companion, a doula, reduces the need for pain medication by 31%, reduces cesarean rates by 28%, and shortens labor by an average of 41 minutes. No drugs, no surgery, just a knowledgeable human presence. Ancient birth attendants didn't know the statistics, but they knew the result, and they passed that knowledge forward with extraordinary care. Here's where it gets even more interesting. Across cultures that had zero contact with each other, indigenous communities in the Americas, ancient Egypt, traditional societies across sub-Saharan Africa, early Asian civilizations, researchers keep finding the same core practices. Upright positioning during labor, warm compresses on the perineum, rhythmic movement and vocalization, specific herbal preparations for specific complications. The same solutions, independently discovered, separated by oceans and millennia. That's not coincidence. That's humans solving the same biological problem with the same biological tools, observation, memory, and collective intelligence. But here's the midpoint of the story, and I need you to sit with it for a second. The knowledge didn't live in books. It lived in bodies. Specifically, in the bodies of women who had given birth, attended births, and survived long enough to teach others. And that means every time a generation was disrupted, through war, through plague, through forced displacement, that knowledge was at risk of disappearing entirely. This is not ancient history. In 17th century Europe, male physicians began replacing midwives in wealthy households. They brought forceps, which were new and exciting and sometimes genuinely useful. They also brought hands they didn't wash, in an era before germ theory, into rooms where women were giving birth. Maternal mortality in physician-attended hospital births in the 1800s was sometimes 5 to 10 times higher than in midwife-attended home births. The knowledge that had kept women alive for 2 million years was being systematically replaced, and women were dying for it. Ignaz Semmelweis figured this out in 1847. He proved, with data, that doctors were killing patients by not washing their hands. He was mocked, institutionalized, and ignored. He died in an asylum at 47, probably from the same infection he'd spent his life trying to prevent. The establishment didn't want to believe that the ancient, instinctive practice of cleanliness that traditional midwives had observed for centuries was more important than their medical credentials. Think of traditional birth knowledge like a river. For millennia it flowed wide and deep, fed by tributaries of observation, oral tradition, and accumulated female wisdom. Then institutions built dams, not out of malice, mostly out of arrogance, and the river got redirected, channeled, in some places nearly drained. And what we're only now realizing is that some of what was lost downstream was irreplaceable. Here's the mechanism that made ancient birth knowledge work, and it's surprisingly elegant. Traditional birth attendants operated on 3 principles simultaneously. They managed the physical environment, positioning, warmth, cleanliness, herbal support. They managed the emotional environment. Fear increases pain, pain increases fear, and breaking that cycle was understood to be as medically important as anything physical. And they managed the social environment, ensuring the mother felt safe, witnessed, and held within her community. Modern medicine excels at the first. It largely abandoned the second and third for most of the 20th century, and the outcomes, in some measurable ways, suffered for it. Epidural rates, cesarean rates, postpartum depression rates, all significantly higher in highly medicalized birth environments than in carefully supported, community-centered ones. This isn't an argument against modern medicine. It's an argument that ancient humans had figured out something about the full picture of birth that got accidentally discarded when we decided that technology was the whole answer. The word midwife literally means with woman. Not above her, not managing her, with her. That positioning, physical, philosophical, relational, is the entire point. Ancient birth attendants understood that their job wasn't to deliver babies. Their job was to hold space while a woman did something her body already knew how to do, and to intervene with precision only when nature needed help. And now, in hospitals around the world, that understanding is coming back. Midwifery-led birth centers are expanding. Doulas are being integrated into hospital protocols. Upright birth positions that ancient cultures took for granted are being reintroduced as evidence-based recommendations. The WHO now explicitly recommends that women in labor be supported by a companion of their choice. It took us about 200 years to rediscover what took our ancestors 2 million years to build. You carry this history in your body, whether you know it or not. Every human alive is here because someone, some woman, somewhere, 1,000 generations back, sat with another woman in the dark and knew exactly what to do. Not because she had a degree, because she had been there, because someone had been there with her, because the knowledge was too important to lose, so it was held in the most durable storage medium humans ever invented, other humans. The most sophisticated medical technology in the ancient world wasn't a tool. It was a relationship. If this changed how you think about what knowledge actually is and where it actually lives, wait until you understand how ancient humans figured out which plants were medicine and which were poison, because that story and this one are connected in a way that makes everything you think you know about the history of science look like a first draft.